There is a shipping container somewhere in the middle of the ocean carrying your electronics, food and clothing. To get that container to you in 2026, you will have to pay 200% more than you did 24 months ago. Right now, procurement executives across the globe are watching their transport costs explode, and soon you too will need to pay attention. The Red Sea crisis has rewritten the economics of global trade, and those costs are coming for your customers next via an increase in your bottom line fees. Are you ready for the reputational impact this inconspicuous ship will cause? While Western businesses scramble to absorb these shocks, one small island nation is doing something radically different. Singapore just switched off their lights on purpose. This was a nationwide blackout simulation designed to stress test an entire country's resilience, conducted every year throughout February. It is a concept most governments would never dare attempt. So why are Singapore and Taiwan leading the world in crisis preparedness? And what does that mean for nations that are not? Coming up on Unbreakable Ventures, we are unpacking the global shipping crisis that is about to hit your wallet regardless of your industry or location. Then we explore why some countries are building resilience into their national DNA. Plus, Malaysian insurers face a catastrophe reckoning, geopolitical volatility refuses to settle, and Australian emergency communications leave rural communities stranded. It's Monday the 9th of February 2026, and you're listening to Unbreakable Ventures Fortnightly Threat Update. So grab a coffee and let's get into it. Welcome to Unbreakable Ventures. I am Ollie Law, Editor-in-Chief, and you join us for another round of our Fortnightly Risk Update, where we dive into emerging and current risks from around the world. We focus on some big stories, and some you may have missed. We use the categories from the World Economic Forum's Global Risk Report to simplify the threats we are monitoring. But we also do some deep dives and interviews with industry peers. I come to you today from a hot and humid Kuala Lumpur. As I mentioned in one of our last episodes, I have relocated closer to the equator to grow our business, but also to learn from some of the most dynamic resilience experts on Earth. Over the course of this year, I'm working on visiting emergency management professionals across Malaysia, Singapore, and the Philippines. But I'll also be analysing and joining businesses on the ground to see what they might do differently when it comes to crisis management and business continuity. One major event happening close to me is the nationwide blackout and their exercise SG Ready, planned annually by the Singaporean government. If time allows, I'll be flying down to experience the latter half of the event in person. And of course, I'll be reporting back here in detail on how it goes. So if that sounds like something you're part of and you want to connect, head to either unbreakableventures.com and follow the contact form, or head to www.fixinc.io to reach out to our advisory team. We would love to hear from you and see about getting you on the podcast. Today, let's start by talking about something affecting nearly every business that moves physical goods: the global shipping crisis. If you have not noticed your transport costs climbing, you will soon enough. Container rates from Asia to Europe and the United States have more than doubled since the middle of 2025. And for some businesses, we are talking increases of 150 to 200% compared to what they were paying 12 months ago. This is not a minor fluctuation. This is a fundamental reshaping of global trade economics. And whether you buy or ship physical goods, this crisis impacts even the items that seem invisible. The components that run your computer, the bottles that carry your water, the streaming services you watch at night. Everything will cost more. So what is driving this? It's a thin stretch of ocean in between Africa, Yemen, and Saudi Arabia called the Red Sea. This vital supply chain artery has a blockage preventing ship passing safely due to significant increase in pirate activity. Vessels that would normally transit through the Suez Canal are being diverted around the Cape of Good Hope. That is the southern tip of Africa. And that detour adds approximately 2 weeks to every journey. 2 weeks of additional fuel, 2 weeks of additional crew costs, 2 weeks of additional insurance, a fortnight where your inventory is sitting on water instead of on your shelves. Now here's where I found it gets interesting. For procurement executives, transport and logistics have become the fastest growing component of their entire cost base. Not raw materials, not labour, shipping. And the sectors feeling this most acutely are those with concentrated Asian production. Computer and electronics manufacturers are particularly exposed. Lead times have extended by 3 to 4 weeks in some cases. Companies are now facing an impossible choice. Do you accept late deliveries and risk losing customers? Or do you shift to air freight at dramatically higher costs just to maintain your commitments? Neither option is good. So who should be worried about this? If you are a retail or consumer goods importer relying heavily on Asian manufacturing, you need to pay attention, especially if you have limited supplier diversification. Those locked into fixed price contracts with customers while bearing variable shipping costs are watching their margins evaporate. Electronics and technology hardware companies face a double hit. Cost increases and delivery reliability challenges are affecting the entire industry, while a drought on RAM and critical computing components add more pressure. If you are running just-in-time inventory models, you may experience stockouts or be forced into expensive air freight just to keep operations running. Small and medium enterprises are particularly vulnerable here. Unlike the multinationals who can negotiate preferential rates or absorb short-term losses, SMEs face disproportionate cost impacts, and they may struggle to pass those increases to price-sensitive customers without losing market share entirely. Food and perishables importers face compounded challenges. Extended shipping times make some products completely unviable for sea freight. So what can you actually do about this? First, and I've said this on many other podcasts, diversify your supply geography and shipping routes. Review where your concentration risk sits. Identify alternative suppliers in regions less affected by the Red Sea disruption. Eastern Europe, Turkey, Latin America, with a close eye on the volatility of the US. Even partial diversification reduces your single point of failure exposure. Second, renegotiate your contract terms. Build shipping cost adjustment mechanisms into your supplier and customer contracts. Index linked pricing or cost pass-through clauses and protect against margin erosion while maintaining commercial relationships. Third, increase safety stock for critical components. Yes, it ties up working capital, but calculate the true cost of stockouts versus additional inventory holding costs. For high margin or business critical products, increasing your buffer stock may prove economically rational. Fourth, explore modal diversification. China to Europe rail freight via the Trans-Siberian or Kazakhstan routes offers intermediate speed and cost. It sits between sea and air. Capacity is limited, but establishing those relationships now creates options later. And finally, audit your landed cost assumptions quarterly. Static cost models based on historical freight rates will lead to pricing and profitability surprises. Implement regular reviews of your true landed costs, current freight rates, fuel surcharges, and the extended transit time impacts on your working capital. Industry analysts are warning that inflationary pressures from shipping may persist through 2026. Sectors with already thin margins have limited capacity to absorb these increases. That means consumer price rises across electronics, textiles, and household goods are coming. The question is not whether costs will rise. The question is whether your business is positioned to manage it. Before we move on to our second threat update, we are sharing our quick-fire emerging threats we have picked up throughout the week. These will be noteworthy stories we think you should know about, but less detailed than our two core threats analysed. Malaysia's insurance sector is confronting a dramatic spike in catastrophe risk for 2026. Climate-driven floods and storms are increasing in both frequency and severity. Insurers face the challenge of maintaining affordable coverage while building adequate reserves. The real risk extends to businesses and property owners who may find coverage becoming prohibitively expensive or simply unavailable in high-risk zones. May this be a warning to other nations experiencing a rise in the frequency of natural disasters. Geopolitical turbulence shows no signs of settling. Trade policy uncertainty, regional conflicts, and shifting alliances continue disrupting established patterns. The convergence of these factors creates an operating environment where supply chains face continuous adjustment pressure. Organizations treating current disruptions as temporary rather than the new normal risk repeated surprises and disruption. Extreme weather is exposing fundamental vulnerabilities in global logistics infrastructure. Floods, storms, and temperature extremes are disrupting ports, warehouses, and transport networks with increasing regularity. The risk compounds when climate impacts affect multiple nodes simultaneously. Supply chain managers must now evaluate climate exposure across their entire network. In Australia, Telstra faces criticism after mobile network outages during emergencies left rural communities unable to contact emergency services. These failures highlight dangerous dependencies on single telecommunications providers. Rural businesses and residents should assess their communications resilience and identify backup options while advocating for improved infrastructure investment. Although COVID-19 feels like a distant past, the pandemic risk insurance market continues to expand. Businesses are seeking protection against future health emergencies following lessons from COVID-19. This reflects corporate recognition that pandemic-related business interruption represents a recurring risk requiring dedicated coverage. Organizations should evaluate their current policy exclusions rather than assuming governmental support during future health crises. Further sources and references can be found in the footnotes of this podcast. But without further ado, let us look at our second major threat update this week. What would happen if your entire country lost power, not just for an hour, but for an extended period? No electricity, no mobile connectivity, no digital payments, no internet. For most nations, that question remains theoretical, a scenario discussed in emergency planning documents that gather dust in filing cabinets, an event that is almost best not thinking about than trying to mitigate against. But as they do every February, Singapore is about to find out how prepared they are for such an event. The Total Defence Day exercise, known as Exercise SG Ready, will simulate simultaneous power outages and digital disruption across the entire island nation. This is not a tabletop exercise in a conference room. This is a nationwide stress test. Government agencies, critical infrastructure operators, businesses, and individual citizens are all expected to participate. The scenarios are designed to identify vulnerabilities in essential services: healthcare, transport, financial services. The exercise tests backup systems and reveals where single points of failure remain unaddressed. Now, what makes Singapore's approach so distinctive? It builds on their Total Defence Framework. Established back in 1984, this framework encompasses 6 pillars: military defence, civil defence, economic defence, social defence, digital defence, and psychological defence. It is a whole-of-society approach to national resilience. Everyone plays a role. But Singapore is not alone in this thinking. Taiwan has developed remarkably similar resilience maturity through its own nationwide mandatory drills: the annual Hankwang military exercises, the Wanan civil defence drills, combined with high adoption of government-backed technology solutions, resilient emergency communication systems, distributed backup infrastructure. Both nations demonstrate something profound. Cultural resilience can be systematically built through regular practice. When you normalize emergency preparedness across an entire population, you fundamentally change how people respond during actual crises. Panic reduces, coordination improves, recovery accelerates. So why should business leaders care about national resilience frameworks? Consider this. Multinational corporations evaluating regional headquarters locations increasingly factor demonstrated resilience capabilities into their investment decisions. Singapore and Taiwan can show international partners that their operations will continue even during severe disruptions. Why else is it that such commitment is given to Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing given their substantial geopolitical threats? Countries unable to demonstrate similar preparedness may lose competitive position for foreign direct investment as the threat landscape continues to evolve, particularly for operations requiring high uptime guarantees and business continuity assurance. Critical infrastructure operators in countries without national resilience frameworks face a different challenge. Your individual company preparedness means little if the interdependent systems around you fail during a cascading crisis. You cannot run a hospital if the power grid fails, the telecommunications network collapses, and the water supply stops. Supply chain managers with Asia-Pacific exposure should also take note. Understanding which regional nodes have stress-tested resilience versus those operating on untested assumptions affects how you design your supply chain. Singapore and Taiwan's demonstrated preparedness provides relative confidence in operational continuity. That is a risk factor you can actually quantify. Okay, admittedly, most organizations and nations have a lot of work to do in order to replicate the scale of what Singapore is doing, particularly if the foundational culture of resilience isn't there yet. So, what could we do to at least start? First, adopt Singapore and Taiwan frameworks as benchmarks. Study their total defense and civil defense exercise structures. Adapt these frameworks to your national or organizational context. Focus on their systematic approach to identifying dependencies and testing failure modes. Second, advocate for national resilience exercises. Business leaders and industry associations should actively lobby governments to establish regular mandatory resilience exercises. Frame the argument in economic terms. Demonstrated national resilience attracts foreign investment and trade partnerships. Untested systems create sovereign risk premiums. Third, do not wait for national frameworks. Conduct your own organization-level simulation exercises. Run crisis simulations testing your operations without power, connectivity, or digital payments. How long could you operate? Which business functions fail first? What manual workarounds actually exist? Where are your critical single points of failure? For some countries like New Zealand, nationwide events can be catastrophic enough that the majority of the population are on their own. So what would you do if help wasn't coming? Fourth, build cultural preparedness within your organization. Singapore and Taiwan succeed because preparedness is normalized across their populations. Replicate this internally through regular drills or emergency preparedness training. Clear communication that resilience is a core operational competency, not an occasional compliance exercise. And finally, document and communicate your resilience capabilities. As demonstrated, resilience becomes a competitive differentiator. Organizations that can evidence their preparedness will have advantages. In supplier qualifications, in insurance negotiations, in investor relations, the contrast between nations actively building resilience and those hoping crises never arrive is becoming stark. Singapore and Taiwan are showing the world what systematic preparedness looks like. The question for everyone else is simple. Are you learning from them or merely observing? Are you hoping you never have to find out what happens when the lights go out? Are you leaving it to political leaders to sort it? Whatever the case, all eyes should be on Singapore every February. It's a rare glimpse into how we should be doing it. That's it for today's update. If you need help navigating these threats or building a plan to protect your business, the same advisors who collate these insights are here to help. Head over to unbreakableventures.com to book a complimentary chat online with one of them. And if you found this resource useful, consider subscribing to Unbreakable Ventures or sharing the article with your network. After all, resilience is about community and communication. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, stay safe.
Unbreakable Ventures is brought to you by the Senior Advisory Team at Fixing, a boutique resilience advisory based in the Oceania, ASEAN and India regions. Special thanks to our sponsor and Europe's leading SaaS provider for resilience software, F24. Our resources are researched and published by industry specialists across New Zealand, Australia, Malaysia and the UK. This podcast provides advice and opinion on disaster recovery and the threat landscape. The content is not a substitute for expert guidance during a crisis. Unbreakable Ventures is trademarked by Fixing Consulting Partners, a Fixing Group company.